Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation for TESOL Arabia 2020. Today, I will be sharing with you information about social emotional learning in the EFL classroom. The session is supposed to be practice-oriented workshop style, but sadly today, since the conference is virtual, we won't have the interactive part and I will just share the best cell practices that I have tried with my students in the classroom. Before I begin my presentation, I want to share some information about me. My name is Khulood Alotaibi. I am a university lecturer at Yampa University College. I have 8 years of experience in English language teaching, and I hold a Master of Science in Curriculum and Instructions with a focus in Global Studies from University of Wisconsin-Madison. I have research interest in curriculum design, educational policy, and educational psychology. So let's get started. Before I begin, I want you to keep in mind that these strategies that I'm going to share are not specific to language classrooms. They can be applied at any classroom and any subject. However, I'm focusing on examples from English classrooms since this is my area of expertise. So, in our presentation today, we're going to discuss what is social emotional learning, why is social emotional learning important, and how to use social emotional learning based activities in your classroom, whether you're teaching English or any other course. Okay. Um, if you can take a minute to read and reflect on this quote by Goldman, people with well developed emotional skills are also more likely to be content and effective in their lives. Mastering the habits of mind that foster their own productivity, people who cannot marshal some control over their emotional life fight inner battles that sabotage their ability for focused work and clear thought. And I find it really interesting and relevant to our learners and ourselves as educators too. We always face students who are reluctant to learn. We face students who are frustrated, students who are angry, stressed out, and demotivated. They're always affected by their inner feelings and emotions, which play a huge role in their academic achievement and they impact their own success. And here comes the importance of learners' emotional intelligence and social emotional learning. So, what is social emotional learning and why do we need it in our classrooms and in our school environment? Social emotional learning, as described by the Collaborative of Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, which are also called CASEL, it's the person's ability to manage emotions, achieve goals, feel and show empathy, maintain healthy relationships, and make responsible decisions. Therefore, social emotional learning targets various behavioral, cognitive, and emotional aspects of our lives. In the slide here, you can see that KSL provide a framework for identifying that identifies 5 competencies for social emotional learning. And these competencies include self-management, self-awareness, responsible decision making, relationship skills, and social awareness. And if you look at the two um, competencies with the orange color, self management and self awareness, these are intrapersonal competencies, and the social and relationship skills are interpersonal competencies. And by working on improving these competencies, we're actually helping the learners to be better learners and to be better humans in their own lives. And in my presentation today, I'm going to focus on the classroom level instructions because sometimes it's really beyond us as teachers to change how schools or home or communities look at these learners and how they can contribute to their learning. So, why do we need Cell in the EFL classroom? We really need Cell for various reasons. We want to provide our learners with a safe learning environment. We want to build a sense of community. We want to increase our learners' accountability, and we want to improve their academic outcome. And this is not going to happen overnight. You might see changes depending on the type of students that you have. Some of them will respond very well, some of them will, resist whatever you try to teach them. But as teachers, we have to keep trying, because, I mean, it really makes a difference when the students start responding to these activities, and when you see changes in their behavior. It's such a rewarding feeling. Okay. Also, Castle provides some approaches for implementing social emotional learning. Um, One of them is to explicitly teach these skills in your own classroom. Integration with the academic curriculum areas. If you're lucky enough, you can have it on the school level, school wide, but usually it's not that easy. Also, organizational culture and climate strategies. There are also some short term outcomes that we can see when we teach social emotional learning. One of them is skill acquisition in the five competence areas, where you can also have improved attitudes. Learners will be, better in terms of responding and reacting to one another and also within the school. Also, we have enhanced learning environment, which becomes supportive, engaging, and participatory. And this is, I'm talking again about the classroom level. If it is implemented school wide, the impact will be bigger, but mostly you will see this impact within your classroom. They also provided behavioral and academic outcomes. Learners, after applying the social emotional learning strategies, will have positive social behavior. They will have fewer conduct problems. When they have less stress and less frustration, this will make them, more polite in the classroom. They will have less emotional distress, and finally, we will have improved academic performance. And this is actually the goal why we're teaching social emotional learning in the classroom. Our focus in today's session is self awareness, self management, and relationship skills. And from my own experience with my own learners, when I did a survey, I just found out that these are the three needed areas where I have to work on. So, this is what I'm going to present today. With self awareness, I'm going to talk about how learners can understand their own emotions and how they can assess their strength and weakness. Under self management, I will be talking about how learners can manage their own stress and how they can regulate their emotions and reactions. And the last thing is relationship skills. I will be talking about strategies for managing healthy relationships, responding constructively, and managing conflicts. So, the first thing we're going to discuss today is self awareness. And it's really one of the most important things to begin with. And I think you cannot cover other competencies without starting with learners understanding themselves and their own feelings and emotions. So, the two strategies that I'm focusing on today here is feelings check in. And this activity or this strategy will help the learners to understand how they feel today and what triggers their feelings that they're feeling. The other activity is identifying strength and weakness. It will help the learners learn what are they good at and what do they need to do to improve their own weakness points. So, to do the feelings check, and one way I used to do it with my students, and I found it really, really helpful, is to create a WhatsApp group, and they just have to drop me an emoji every day in the morning before our class, um, to let me know how they feel without actually going into details about what triggers this feeling. So by doing so, I will be aware of the classroom environment, the atmosphere in the class. Are my students excited today? Are they sad today? I will look at the majority and I will identify my instructions and activities for that lesson based on how they feel. So if they're feeling down, I try to, do something that make them positive, change my activities a little bit, and if they are in a good mood and excited, I can give them something that is a little bit more challenging for them. Sometimes when we have more time, we usually have discussion about what triggers those feelings, and we try to understand and unpack how do they feel and why do they feel this way. Another way that you can do this is using mood tracking applications. One example is the application called Moodily. And in this application, students will have to journal their own feelings every day through certain icons and emojis that they can use, and in the comment section they can talk about what triggers these emotions, and they just can keep it to themselves. In this kind of application, they do not share with anyone, but at the end of the month, the application will show them the calendar for the whole month with the emojis of their feelings, and they can reflect on their feelings within the past month. What happened? Were they happy most of the time? Were they sad most of the time? Were they angry? And they have to work on these issues. And actually, by helping our learners to reflect on their emotions and to provide them the support, this will have a good impact on their learning and it will affect their life positively in general. The other activity that I like to do with my students, usually at the beginning of the semester, is to assess their own strengths and weaknesses. So, usually, I share with them something like this worksheet that you see on the screen. It's divided to two columns, and they have to talk about their top strength and their top weaknesses. Um, what I do when I do this activity, I model it for them, and they can do it in general first about their own personality in life, and then specifically about English language learning. Like for example, you will get students will say my top strength is reading. I love reading a lot, but my top weakness is speaking because I'm shy to speak in front of others. And then I will let them write down how would they improve their weakness points. So they have to brainstorm with their classmates if they are willing to share with them. They sit together in groups and they help each other by giving one another some tips and advice on how to improve this weakness. Or if the student is not willing to share yet, they can just keep it to themselves and they will reflect silently how would they improve this. And I keep checking with them later in the semester if they were able to work on this weakness point or not. The second aspect that I'm focusing on is self-management. And we have many students who struggle with self-management, whether managing their emotions or their goals and achievements. And under self-management today, I'm going to talk about two interesting activities, which are rose, thorn, bud, and SMART goals. Now, with the rose, thorn, bud, I usually do it at the beginning of the semester or I like to do it after learning a new grammatical point or after learning um, a new unit. So when we finish the unit, we talk about the rose, thorn, bud, and it's a way of them telling me what went well and what didn't go well. So at the beginning of the semester, when I do the rose, thorn, bud, is to establish this environment where everyone feels safe to share their emotions. So I begin by sharing my rose, thorn, bud as a teacher because it's really important that we model for our students these activities. We cannot just ask them to open up to everyone and trust everyone in the class when we as teachers don't start this first. So in the rose column, they have to talk about something positive that happened to them, maybe last week or 2 days ago, and they have to explain it and how did they feel when this happened. Then in the thorn part, they have to talk about something that was challenging, that was struggling, that was a struggle for them that they faced and how it was difficult and stressful. And in the bud, they're going to talk about something they're looking forward for, something they are excited to do. And this activity is really interesting. I tried it with so many students and they loved it. They never want to stop when we started because while doing this activity, we give them the chance to look at all aspects of their life. They look at the good and the bad and something they look forward in the future. And it's always interesting because when you start with discussing these personal rose thorn bud, the students will feel like someone cares about them in this class, and this will help form a community between them and their classmates and also with the teacher. So it will be easier later when you apply this to language learning. So that's a sample of my students' work when we did the rosebud thorn, and usually they reflect at the end of the unit about how they felt regarding the new items that we learned. I'm not sure if this is clear, but in the rose, my student has written last week I learned a new thing like new grammar and vocabulary that helped me develop my English, and I helped my sister to study math. Uh, so these are the good things that happened to her. She talked about her own learning experience and then she linked it to something personal, how she helped her sister learn math. So the way that we do this exercise is to remind our student from time to time that they should not focus on the negative aspects of things that happen to them at home and life or when they learn something difficult in the class. We try to make them also focus on the good things that happened to them, the good things that made them felt successful. And this way we balance their feelings so they will not be demotivated. They will also feel a sense of achievement when they write it down and they read it out loud. Now with these activities again, I always encourage my students to share, but sometimes I get students who are shy or who are quiet and don't like to share with others and they don't feel like they trust them yet. So it's really important that we do not impose sharing with others on them. I always give them the freedom that it's important that you do it. You don't have to share it with me as a teacher. You don't have to share it with your friends. Some of them will change their mind after a while. They will share it with the class. Some of them will come to my office and they will tell me, okay, Miss, we want to share it with you only. And that's really important, which means they're trusting me already and they are ready to share whatever is hard for them with me. And this will give me like an understanding of what they're struggling with, and I will be able to help them in their learning, whether it's grammar, writing, reading, listening, and their whole journey of language learning. Another thing that I like to do is goal setting. And it's really important to do this at the beginning of the semester or before the midterm exams. And it's the usual goal setting, smart way of setting goals. So I explain to my learners what are SMART goals, that they have to be specific, measurable, acceptable, realistic, and time bound. And they have to do it individually, and they keep it in their notebook, and they have to think when they go home, they have to think about how are they going to achieve these goals. They can come to me if they want help on how to achieve certain goals. Sometimes they will tell me that their goal is to learn more vocabulary in English, and they will ask me for help. So I would suggest some links or some strategies for them, and they write it down, and they have to actually use these links or use these strategies to work on improving themselves. And I usually check with them after the midterm or towards the end of the semester how well they have achieved regarding the goals that they have set to themselves. Again, we cannot force them to do it, but we try to encourage them, and it will work. Some students like this kind of external motivation, that someone is encouraging them, someone is checking on them. So it's really important if you do it at the beginning of the semester, where they have to make their SMART goals in terms of learning the language. How are they going to improve themselves this semester? My favorite part is the relationship skills, and it's one of the most important competencies in the framework for CASEL. And under relationship skills, I'm going to focus on managing healthy relationships, responding constructively, and managing conflicts. One of the most important parts about establishing healthy relationships that I always teach my students is how to set boundaries. This is really important if you are doing project based learning in your classroom, where your students have to work together as groups. I'm sure they always come back to you with lots of complaints, telling you that they don't like this person, or they don't want to work with this person, or this person is not responding, or this person is not cooperating. So it's really good to have this healthy discussion with your learners in the classroom on how to set boundaries and lead in your team. So, the way I do this activity is by talking about boundaries in general. As you see in this worksheet that I have on the slide, what is a boundary? And I ask them to define it, either using words or making a drawing, whatever represent the word boundary in their mind. And then I ask them to give me examples of boundaries that they have set for others, and boundaries that have been crossed by others, and how did they feel when someone crossed these boundaries, or how did they feel when they set boundaries for other people in their life. And it's really, really important because a lot of students, especially in the foundation year, where I teach, they just finish high school and they move to a bigger kind of environment with different kind of people they're not used to. So it's really hard for them to draw boundaries, and they don't even know the skills at that stage of their life. By doing this exercise, I have learned a lot by my students. I have learned about them, about their personalities, what makes them comfortable, what makes them uncomfortable, and I provided support for them. After doing this activity in general and talking about boundaries in their life and what does it mean to them, I give them group work scenarios where they have to set boundaries for certain problems that happens there. So what I do, I divide my students into groups, and I give each group a slip of paper with a description. And they have to work together to come up with a boundary they have to put for the other person in the group. Like, for example, uh, your group member does not allow anyone to express their opinions. She always thinks she is right and her opinion only matters. This happens a lot, and you always get the student who knows it all and who always telling the others what to do and dismissing their great ideas because she thinks she's the best. So instead of my students coming to me all the time complaining and I have to go and solve the problem, it's best that I teach my students and equip them with the skills that they need to be able to solve this problem in their own. And most of these scenarios will focus on setting boundaries for others. So it's really important skill. You might not see the importance of it now, but if you think about it and you reflect about the problems that you face with your students in the classroom, it will help them improve their work. The other activity that I'm focusing on here, it's for responding in a constructive way. And it's a skill that our learners need to be able to receive criticism and give ones. So, initially, when I asked them to give feedback on their classmates' piece of writing or presentation, they will just focus on finding the grammatical mistakes, the spelling mistakes. Okay, miss, here we have three spelling mistakes, and here this grammatical point is not correct, and this word choice is not good. And whenever we give the feedback to the others, sometimes they take it nicely when it's about the grammatical and spelling mistakes, but usually with things that are subjective, like word choice or style, they do not like it. So, what I noticed that my students need to learn how to give a constructive feedback. And one of the activities that I can use to give a constructive feedback is to use tag activity. And tag means the T stands for telling your friends something that you like, the A asking them questions, and the G giving them suggestion for improvement. And then I taught them some phrases um, for them, like question starters or sentence starters, for them to use a polite way of giving a constructive feedback and responding in a constructive way to others' work. And that's part of their work. In a piece of writing that they were working on the importance of English language, um, my students were divided into groups where they have to do the writing, and then I had to distribute the papers and shuffle them between the other groups, and I asked them to give a feedback using tag strategies. And uh, one of the things that they have written here, the first part is telling them something they like. We really like this part. Now we can deal with technology without learning English. The questions, they didn't have any questions because I think it's the hardest part for them to come up with some critical questions. And the G for the suggestion, they wrote one thing you can improve is you should leave a space at the beginning of the paragraph. And I like how my students adapted this way in giving their feedback, especially where they have to tell the other group something nice. Because when you start with telling the others something nice, then they will take your suggestions in a better way and they will accept it without feeling threatened that the other person is telling me what to do. And does she think she's better than me? That's why she's telling me what to do. You know, these kind of feelings that you find when you do, uh, when you put your students in pairs and you ask them to evaluate each other's work. The third activity that I want to focus on is conflict resolution and having to deal with different perspectives. Again, when you have group work with with your students, you will always have different opinions, students who agree and others who disagree, and sometimes things will get ugly. And at this stage, we have to teach them that, things have two perspectives and things have two sides of the story, and people can change their perspectives according to how they see things. And it's really important that we make them aware of this, because sometimes they don't know, and sometimes they think their own reality is the only reality, and their opinion is the best opinion out there. And it's also important when you teach your learners in English class how to express their opinions, how do they agree and disagree, and when they do some kind of debates. So in this activity, if you see these pictures that have two perspectives, one that says 9, the other one says 6, one says 4, and the other one says 3. I actually, for this activity, I get a couple of pictures that have two possible answers. And what I do, I'm going to share the steps with you in a minute. What I do with my learners, I cut these pictures into halves, and I just put my students alone, and I give each student a different, picture. And I will just ask them to write their opinion on this picture, like, what's the number that you see in the picture, or what do you see in this picture? And they will write down, I see number 9, or I see number 6, I see 3 bars, or I see 4, I see shoes, or I see a knife. It depends on what kind of picture that I'm using. And once they finish writing down their answers, I I put the students who have the two halves of the same picture together, and without looking at the picture, I tell them that they have the same picture. Could they share their what they have written to one another? And this is really funny because, when I put them together and one of them would say, "Oh, miss, I have a picture that has number 6," and the other one will say, "No, miss, my picture says number 9." And then they look at me and they would say something like, "Oh, miss, I think you put me with the wrong person. I don't think we have the same picture." So what I do at this point, I give them the full picture that I have that is not cut in halves. And this is where the aha moments come. And they will think, "Oh, that's why I thought it's 6, I thought it's 9," and so on. So what I do then, I will let them share their own perspective together, and then they have to answer some reflection questions about their own perspective and why did they interpret this picture this way. So one of the reflection questions that they have to answer is, were your partner's perspective different from yours? What were some things you learned by considering another's perspective? Is conflict good or bad? Because there was some kind of conflict, although it's not strong, but they had to resolve that kind of conflict. And what's the most important outcome of this conflict that you had with your friend? And this way they have to learn that whatever they read, whatever they hear is will possibly have different interpretations. People will look at it differently. They will interpret it into so many different ways, and that should be fine as long as we do not fight over the same topic. And then I will discuss this with them further, that whenever they have a problem in their group project that they're working on, they have to consider asking themselves these questions. They have to consider putting themselves in the other person's shoes, and learning to appreciate their own perspective or their own opinion on the matter. That's all for today. I hope I didn't spend so much time talking about this. Thanks for sticking around until the end of the presentation. One last thing I will ask you to do, if you please scan the barcode for the survey and answer some reflection questions about the social emotional learning strategies that I shared with you today. If you have got any questions, you can email me your questions or comments, or you even can share with me your own experiences. I would be really, really glad to read your own experience with your own students. My email is written for your reference here. Um, and thank you so much.